Hi, welcome back to Through the Valley. This is your host, Bahar Alexander, executive coach, author, and speaker. Today, we have a guest. We have a guest who's going to be talking about her journey through the valley. Today's guest is someone who brings both heart and depth into the world of technology. With over 11 years of experience in product management and client solutions, she's not just focused on results. She's deeply committed to people, growth, and meaningful impact. What makes her journey especially powerful is how she blends her background in psychology with data and real-world experiences, allowing her to truly understand both people and systems. She's passionate about nurturing talent, creating solutions that genuinely serve others, and aligning her work with a bigger purpose. I'm really excited to have her here today and to explore the path that brought her to where she is now. Welcome, Emily.
Wow, thank you. I'm honored to be here, grateful that you invited me, and correct that introduction just went straight to my heart. So thank you. You've been a huge part of that path, so it's nice to be able to pay it back in some small way.
Thank you for that. You're so kind. It's been a journey for us, hasn't it?
It has many years now at this point.
Exactly. Emily and I started working together sometime towards the end of 2023, while Emily was going through her own journey through the valley, the first one that we experienced together. And it's been a couple of years of pure joy working with you, Emily. You are one of those people who really truly understands what it means to walk through the valley and not around it. Take us all the way back for a moment, before the title, before the experience. Who were you at the beginning of your journey, and what were you searching for?
My career journey in general, at the beginning, I completely admit, I still thought of myself as an academic. I was searching for a break between I just finished a master's and I was still fully intending very genuinely to go on for my PhD, but I wanted a job to kind of take a year off, quote unquote.
Yes.
And so therefore what I was searching for, completely honestly, was not having to cross a bridge. I lived on the
Mhm.
island part of Rhode Island at the time, so I took the first job I could find that let me go to work without having to cross a bridge because I had zero intention of being there past 9 months, and spoiler alert, I was there for almost 9 years.
Gosh, the irony of life, right?
Yeah. It was, so that's a long way to think back on, but I
Mhm.
had no idea what I was looking for is the short answer. I really thought a job was just get up, go to work, get a paycheck, and that my career was academia, and that was, in my mind, the way to find meaning in the work.
I love your honesty.
I can say now I didn't have to cross a bridge. I wouldn't have told you that then, but that was
No.
how I chose that job.
But it takes so much courage to not only step into challenges, but also admit when we have not been intentional about our journey. And so many professionals find themselves in the same position, being rolling stones in their careers. Okay, this job knocked on my door, so I said yes. Then the next one rolled around and I said yes. Then there was a promotion in a direction and I said yes. I wonder how the meaning behind your journey has changed since then.
Well, you really just described how I ended up there for it was actually closer to 8 years, but 9 fit the 9 months better. Because, after the first while, there was a big product release, and then I had to see it through to the end. And then there was a promotion, and then there was an acquisition, and then there was an IPO, and as you pointed out. And that meant that by the time COVID happened, actually, was sort of the
Mhm.
initial trigger for me to pick up my head. Insurance rates in the States were historically low, and this company did very
Yes.
niche mortgage residential lending software technology. So I sort of had this story in my head that I had unintentionally, but still built this career in this super niche space, and I couldn't leave because I had all of this useless knowledge about title insurance rates and appraisals and things that, wouldn't serve me anywhere else. And a ton of imposter syndrome because I had grown up really
Oh,
fast at this company, but I was like, there's no way I could be a director somewhere else. There's no way I could lead a team at another organization. So it was, I think, a story you've probably heard many times in your line of work, but I thought was, of course, unique to me, as everyone does. But really, when rates dropped and everyone else was home making sourdough bread and I was working 90
yeah.
hour weeks because we were trying to figure out how to do everything that happened with these transactions online, I was like, okay, this is my career now. I at least can acknowledge that. So maybe I take the time to think about what do I want out of my career if I'm not going back for that PhD, if I'm a
Hmm.
person who works in technology and not an academic, how do I take what I've been doing and figure out where I actually get meaning from it and what of it I like? Why have I stayed versus, do I just want to live in title insurance forever?
Exactly. Wow. It's been a profound journey, and I'm sure you've done a lot of growing through it. With growth comes pain, and those growing pains are really absolutely a necessity to the journey as we go through the three specific levels of integration, internal architecture, and inner authority. I
Mhm.
know you're no stranger to it. When you talk about how it was like for you initially, as you were perhaps less intentional and much more just moving with the opportunities, where do you think you were when we talk about these specific phases of development?
It's a really interesting question. I think that I didn't even realize what I needed to integrate, if that makes sense. I think that
Oh,
I was still in a stage of having created this new persona, for lack of a better term, that was a tech employee, that was a leader, that was all of these things. And that felt good in a way that, like, I didn't even realize that there was work to be done in bringing any of the things I learned from former lives with me along the journey. It was sort of just
oh.
like, I am this new person and this is who I am now, rather than sort of the aggregate of all of my parts.
And now that you have a much deeper understanding, I know you have a background in psychology, so that already gives you a foundation in understanding human interactions and relational intelligence. But having learned everything that you've learned, especially towards, let's say, the last 2.5, 3 years of your intense work, bringing these phases up to the surface and exploring each one, examining each one, where do you think your greatest growth has happened in the last, let's say, 2.5 years?
Well, this is where I am excited to be on your podcast because I really have you to thank for helping me put what I was trying to do into words and concrete steps. When Forward parted with me and half of my team, I feel like I knew that I wanted to be a person whose strength was in my own confidence, my own abilities. But I recognized that even though I had thought I was there, I wasn't really there yet because I had known it was time to leave. They had known it was not right. And yet, still, as soon
Mm,
as that happened, I was in this moment of protecting everyone else who was let go. I was in this
yes.
moment of, falling back on all these old habits, questioning myself, even though I was already,
Yes.
halfway through interviewing for what became my next job. I could see where I wanted to be, but I didn't know how to get there. And I think the first exercise you asked me to do was kind of put myself into eras of my life and describe each of those people almost as if they were different people. And you know that I had hilariously already thought of my life in different ways because I've changed my name, not really changed, but gone by different nicknames a few times in my
Mhm.
life. So that was actually an easy and almost fun way to think about it. But that was the first real step of like realizing that there were all these different eras that I could potentially integrate that were not different people, but that needed different things.
Yes. Oh, I remember. I remember those days. You are always so curious, so brave, because it's very confronting when I have these sorts of conversations with clients, especially when it's about integration, but actually about all of the three phases. But integration has got to be the toughest one. It's almost like putting up a mirror and you're asking the client to look in it. And what the image you see is not always what you want to be seeing, because somehow there is a disconnect between identity and how you're moving through life. But you were always very brave about it. And I wonder, what do you think was the greatest, what do you think is the greatest quality that's necessary to navigate the first phase, integration phase, which is foundational?
That's a great question. I feel like actually you just primed me for this, so I might find a different answer, but it's not even just being curious, but as I believe it was Whitman, I can't actually remember who said it, but being curious, not judgmental, is you have to be willing not only to ask the questions, but to hear the answers of yourself. It's humbling, but in a way that is really exciting if you're ready for it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. You just described what it means to be truly aware. not aware according to plank on the wall or some sort of a badge we wear, but really embodying awareness, because the sound that echoes back once we speak into that void, that sound is carrying a lot of truth.
Yes.
And it's not that we don't want to hear the truth, we just don't know whether we can handle the truth.
There's a lot to handle there.
There is a lot to handle there. So much we try to initially, not consciously, subconsciously push under the surface, because leaving it unexamined seems like the better choice, because examining it would require effort.
Right. That's why that curiosity is so important.
Exactly. Now, I am very familiar with your story.
Yes.
I've been there supporting you through it. And every time I threw a pitch, you knew how to kick it right out of the ballpark.
Well, I had a great coach.
You're so kind. You did a lot of heavy lifting. What do you think was the hardest part of the false patterns you had learned that you had to break down? What was the greatest element in the integration phase for you to break down, to shatter?
Oh, definitely the habits that I had developed that were really intentional, that I thought were positive, that were actually holding me back. And the specific example that comes to mind that you were kind enough not to laugh at me about was, as mentioned, giving myself, different names throughout different eras of my life for various reasons. I went by my middle name through all of, my awkward high school phase, not because I liked my middle name, but just because there are a lot of Emilys in the world, and I got sick of being, one of so many of them. And since that was the, angsty high school phase, we have a running joke in my family. Even my husband refers to my anxiety as my middle name. And we thought this was like a positive, adaptive thing where, Jean is this mean person. And if I'm, Jean is being mean to me, that's a whole thing. And having to confront, or getting to confront that with you of, actually Jean is part of who I am and she needs things too. And that was harder because I had spent so much time building that and thinking that this was like there are other examples, but that's the funny one that comes to mind of just like, I was so proud of this adaptive thing that was actually maladaptive.
Exactly. When we're looking at it from that close a distance, we don't really see what's happening. But
Yeah.
one of the most powerful things we do in coaching is taking a higher perspective. You're not in the maze, you're above the maze. So you get to look in. Because some of these innocent ways we set ourselves up for pain is creating fractures in our identity.
Mhm.
And those fractures actually lead to more dysfunction, because when we are disowning that part of ourselves that has certain protective tendencies, we're saying this part of us is wrong. Instead of asking, where does the protection mechanism come from? It's a survival strategy. Where is it coming from? And why do I have it? And then maybe asking, do I need it still?
Mm-hmm. And is it actually serving the purpose? I think it's serving, because that bleeds into my professional life, where I think when I first became a people manager, it was at a company that was a little rough around the edges, and that, felt like my main job was protecting people. And through that kind of work of realizing I'm actually not serving them or myself by being this human shield and lighting myself on fire to keep other people warm is not the positive that I think it is. Once you see that pattern, it's easier to identify, but having one of those breakthroughs is hard.
Oh my gosh. It's a beautiful saying that says, a bad day for the ego is a great day for the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitively describes one of these moments, because it really is very challenging for the ego. There's much humble pie to eat when those situations come up.
Yep. I think you said in your first introduction to the podcast that the valley is the space between who you were conditioned to be and who you're becoming. And I was like, oh, yep, violently humbling. That is absolutely correct.
Exactly. And I love how much energy and time you spend really understanding it. And that's for sure has been one of the reasons you have managed to navigate through it with so much integrity and also accomplish so much, because the valley is not easy on ego. It's not. It tests you. It brings up repeated situations where you're supposed to actually be looking at it in this circular motion, where with every cycle you make, you take a higher view. But once you're in it, it looks very deceiving. It feels like repeating the same thing. It feels like almost being victimized to a state. You didn't see it that way. What was it about what you were perceiving that helped you take that higher perspective? Because I was saying it, but you have to be able to practice it. And that's probably one of the hardest things for people to do, to take that higher perspective. They're so attached to their experience. It's hard for them to take that higher perspective. What was it that helped you get to that level?
That's a really great question. I think some of it is having enough perspective of other things in your life that you can kind of really start hone in on what matters in a way that it's really difficult when you're young, starting out, building a career. You don't have anything behind you. Everything matters. You don't
Yes.
have the perspective to learn that. You don't have a way to prioritize it. But when you have a life, a family, a house, and something happens to your job or vice versa, you have a great stable job, but something happens in your life, you have a little bit more of a foundational framework to build from that. So I was very fortunate to have had a few things I'd been through where, I knew that I would be okay coming out of the valley. I hadn't been through the valley before, but you have ups and downs in life.
Of course.
And I had a lot of wonderful people, yourself included, who helped me. All the things you say to someone else when you're in a leadership position and something happens to them, it's hard to actually, I think you're the last person in most cases that you're able to turn that on. But when you have built a network of people whose opinions you really respect that have some perspective on that, it helps kind of give you a place to start so you can see it for what it is and not what it feels like.
Wow, that's so profound. It's absolutely true. And what a perfect segue to move from integration to internal architecture, because that's what you're referring to right now. You have created tremendous amount of wisdom, and you've always been very good at sharing it with others, imparting with your wisdom to help others. And in many ways, you actually would pick up the slack for their development by really stepping into that role of protection, nurturing, and in some ways, enablement, not always in healthy ways, to the point where you would hold yourself back. That's the perfect description of the internal architecture phase not being fully embodied. Tell us, Emily, how are you embodying your own structure now? Because you built this beautiful structure, but for a very long time, everybody else was living in it while you were living on the streets. How have you
That's
gone from not living in your structure to living in your structure?
The funny thing about the timing with everything else is, as you know, I also became a mother during that timing,
Yes.
and there is no more immediate way to prove that you can't pour from an empty cup than becoming a mother, where you do
Oh,
nothing but pour from an empty cup, and
gosh.
yet you still learn that.
Yes.
You can be so tired and so hungry, and it's still not the same as just not feeding yourself, not taking care of yourself. I'm not saying, that you're doing anything to that extent, but it's a just very physical representation of that. You have to be in your own, not in your own space. You have to be kind of living by what you want others to do, not
Yeah.
putting yourself even first, but putting yourself there at
Putting
least.
yourself there. Exactly.
It's a physical representation of that. And it also, for me at least, gave the perspective again of like what really matters. For example, easier to help tell my team they should have work-life balance. Make sure they're taking vacation. But oh well,
Mm,
make sure everybody else can take a holiday vacation. I will pick up the slack. Now that I have a kid, I'm not going to pick up the slack either. I need to put my money
exactly.
where my mouth is. So I had the kind of those two things happening at the same time. So I think I got a little bit of a speed course through that. But that's sort of how I've been doing it, is when I feel myself start to say, oh, well, this person needs a break, so I need to do
Yes.
that. It's like, asking what I would want them to do in that situation. I've got a couple of different tools that I use to try and figure out how I might approach it differently in a way that is authentic to the leader I want to be and actually
Exactly.
leading by example.
That's beautiful. If you don't mind, give us one of those exercises for the listeners.
Let me see what's a helpful one. Well, mostly, okay, I've worked most of my career in software, which coming from having done biomedical research, software can feel very high stakes. There are lots of moments where, you have an executive that says, I need this tonight. Doesn't matter what else you have going on. But there is literally never a time where it is life or
Mhm.
death. Never.
Yeah.
Nobody's life depends on this. Sometimes livelihood, sometimes jobs. I'm not saying the stakes aren't real, but the stakes aren't putting out fire. And I find as a leader, there are times where there's an all hands on deck kind of important situation to actually go above and beyond. But if you ask that of people, myself included, all the time, nothing ever matters because everything's on fire all the time. So I one of those examples is asking the team, not just myself, what happens if we don't do this tonight? Just keep that almost like the 5 whys exercise, but for whenever
Exactly.
there's some sort of really urgent thing. And very, very rarely you will get to a like, there might be an actual negative outcome. Sometimes you get to, we'll lose a contract, and okay, well, what's the value of that? Or how likely is it that that's actually going to happen versus there's some, everybody's been on both sides of this. So just taking a step back when people are starting to from here's the problem to solve to actually solving it, to take 10 minutes to ask ourselves what happens if we do this during normal business hours? What happens if we do
Mhm.
this? Are we deprioritizing other things? And that's just one of those exercises that I think I, as a leader, can say all day, you don't have to do this. You can turn off your computer. Most people are still going to be like, yeah, but the CEO asked for it, so I'm going to do
True.
it anyway. But if I walk them through the exercise of like what is actually at stake here, I feel like it gives them permission to kind of take a breath.
You're spot on. Such a perfect description of the exercise of creating space in action.
Mhm.
When we're younger, especially as high performers, and we're navigating our growth process, there is such a high praise for speed. It's actually one of the things we compliment ourselves on. And when the environment affirms that, it feels good. It kind of makes us puff up a little bit and say, oh, I
Mhm.
have speed on my side. This is a good thing. And to a point you made earlier in our conversation, when you don't have a title behind your name yet, you don't have a full resume of experience where self-esteem according to your skills and how you fill a gap in your environment is not fully formed yet. Identity has not weaved itself around this sort of skill set that you're providing value on. It's easy to say speed is the most important thing.
Mhm.
But there comes a pivotal moment where we have to slow things down. We're no longer rewarded on our speed because speed actually makes us impulsive, look like we're leaders who don't know how to take the group with us along for the journey. And not everyone processes information at the speed as we probably can. And that doesn't look good for our presence either.
Mhm.
Such a great example this was. And it gives us, I think it gives the listeners a better understanding of how these exercises, these tools show up in real time. And that's absolutely profound because the listeners, hopefully, if they've listened to episode 4, they're familiar with the exercises I provided, especially in integration phase, in internal architecture phase, both do phases, slowing things down. You
Mhm.
have got to provide yourself time. There is nothing wrong with taking up a little bit more time. And we have to understand that our leadership is not amplified through speed, but it's amplified through intentionality,
Yeah.
right?
The first female leader I ever had in tech, it's a rare
Yeah.
thing, was also the first one to say, when you're on vacation, delete Slack, delete Teams,
Delete
like
Slack. Exactly.
not just don't monitor it, actually make it go away. And
Yeah.
that has helped kind of inform how I did those, how I've have managed since then, because it's so easy to just, oh, well, I'll just chime
So
in here. But to your point, you don't
yes.
have the context. You just sound like you're going off the cuff, and it's a lot better to be intentional. And your presence sort of requires absence sometimes.
That's absolutely true. But tell me honestly, the first time you used this exercise, were you comfortable with it?
Oh,
Or
absolutely not.
take us through that. Take us through the energy that went through you the first time you had to do this exercise. So, people at home listening to this podcast and they are wanting to put this exercise into action, this tool, so they know what it's like to go through it and they don't have some naive idea that it's always easy. It's gonna be, easygoing and not a big challenge?
The first time I tried to do this, I inherited a team. I was relatively new to the workforce in general, let alone people management. And I was sort of vaulted into a relatively strong leadership position of actually quite a large team, a large portfolio of products. And I was fully aware that everybody who reported to me was older than me, more experienced
Uh,
than me. It was, in retrospect, I have absolutely no idea what that CEO saw in me that, just made them be like, this is a good idea. I grew a lot from it and I learned a lot from it, but I'm surprised that anybody took that chance on me.
uh-huh.
But I think the first time I tried to do this, I could see that team was burned out. I could see that they resented me in some ways. So I will fully admit to you now, the first couple times I saw this, I just didn't want people to quit. I would tell them, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd go home and do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it took me an embarrassingly long time, if I'm honest, to learn to put my money where my mouth is with this. And
Mhm.
I think actually I, as you said, with the internal architecture, was really good at doing this for my team before I even remembered that this had started as something
Yes.
where I was picking up the slack, which implied that
Mhm.
it was slack, which implied that it really was as urgent as I was telling everyone that it wasn't. And that was creating this dissonance that was making me hate my job.
Yes.
And that wasn't fair to the company. That wasn't fair to me. It wasn't fair to my team because I was, especially a lot of these times I would do it and they wouldn't even know that I'd done it. So they would just think that it never ended up getting done and it really wasn't that urgent. And I think that was what made it click for me was I remember someone saying like, oh, well, they asked for this thing. They said it was urgent and then it was never done and nothing happened. So the fact that they didn't
Um,
know that I was kind of secretly doing it meant that they were questioning leadership. They were questioning whether these things were important. And I was like, oh, this is harmful in pretty much every direction. So I started by actually putting these questions back to the people who were asking me of things, which is
okay.
scary to go to the CEO when you're only a VP or a director and be like, I know you think you need this tonight. Here's all the reasons that I think it's actually okay if I do it tomorrow. And essentially
Yes.
asking permission for
Yes.
not doing that. And then I was shocked. Most of the time they were like, yeah, that's okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that was like, oh, I've wasted years of my life doing this. And there were definitely times where people pushed back, but I think there were also times where they'd say, no, 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 I definitely need it tonight. I would get it done. And they wouldn't do anything with it until like the next day for some reason. And I was like, so then I would follow up and have a conversation and be like, how did this help you having it in that time? And kind of do the same, trying to lead them to water, but managing up is a lot harder, as you know, than managing down. It took years. It took trial and error. It took, admittedly, sometimes where I thought I was good at this until a different person that I didn't have that rapport with would ask for something. And now I'm, at a new company, so I'm having to build these boundaries, learn these personalities all over again.
Of
It's a good
course.
test of leadership to be able to say, can I actually do this, or was I just comfortable where I was?
I love this. What a great example. And thank you for your courage for sharing this. The listeners will really benefit from the realness of this experience. Because when I talk about it, people might think, oh, you're a coach, you know how to speak to these facts. Little did they know I've gone through many of these scenarios myself. But when they listen to you talk about it, there is something else that happens. They can see themselves in your shoes, they can relate to you, and the messages resonate on a level that can truly be transformative. So, very brave of you to share all of this. And I wonder, Emily, how do you think the growth that you've gone through, because we know it has benefited you, it has helped you really do some therapeutic surgical removal of some of the conditioning, the emotional wounds that were paired with them. We know it has benefited you, that now you know how to live within your architecture, your internal architecture, which gives you a lot more leadership resonance in your environment. We also know how that's contributed to your inner authority. How do you think these growth moments, whether it was in integration or internal architecture, have benefited your environment?
Christian, I think the environment, at least in a professional setting, starts with the team. And I think that people can tell when their leader is coming from a place of experience versus coming from a place of fear versus coming from, there's a lot of different ways that people show up executive presence. And I think the
Yes.
word that has been used to describe me the most throughout the last couple of years of my career is genuine, which
Mhm.
is not really what you think of as a product person who's, results, KPIs, blah, blah, blah. So I think the fact that people think of me as, I hope, and people say, a people first leader is because I'm recognizing that this identity transition sort of needed to help for me to do this work, for me to show up for them in a way that is authentic.
Mhm.
And that translates to business outcomes. Really high performing teams. I work with people who want to show up to work. I actually also have people on my teams who feel like it's okay to come to me and say, this environment isn't serving me anymore. Can you help me find a different role? And like, I think that there, at
Powerful.
least in American culture, there's a lot of hesitation around that. Nobody, you're not supposed to tell your employer if you're thinking about looking for a new job. And the fact that people feel comfortable coming to me and having these conversations and realizing that it's not just your fit for the role, it's your fit for the company's fit for you. And that I will hear that and sometimes
Mhm.
help them figure out how to make the environment fit, but sometimes help them go in a different direction. I think that's been my experience and is my goal. So that's, I derive a lot of energy from getting to be that and build those relationships with people. But I think that's how it's helped shape the environment. And that's fortunately for me a translatable skill because, in
Absolutely.
product, every time you change industries or do something, you have to learn a whole new set of things. But that part is true so far for me everywhere.
Across the board, you're absolutely right, because it's not our technical capacity that makes us a good leader. It's what most people like to refer to as soft skills, and I like to refer to as the skills. They're the human skills behind leadership that truly translate into something meaningful in our environment. Because you've seen firsthand what the effect of poor leadership can be
Mhm.
to our nervous systems, to our biology, to how we navigate the rest of our lives, the stress we take home with us. How do you think you've changed, and what do you think you've learned from bad leadership?
One of the bigger lessons is I used to approach work and then leadership as not wanting people to like me in like a playground sense, but like wanting people to want to work with me at the very least, respect, trying to show up in a way that supports them, that supports the business, trying to be 75 different people all at the same time. I
Yes.
think what I've learned is leadership isn't the next natural progression for everyone on the career ladder. There's lots of people who are very well suited to very senior IC roles, and there needs to be space for those people. But for leaders, in my opinion, you can't be 75 people at the same time. And it's most important to be who you are and how you are. And everything else sort of falls into place for that. So I've gone from going into a room, what is it, Tom Ford, going into a
Mhm.
room and wondering if people like me to going into a room and wondering how I see them.
You made 2 points that I have to repeat, so profound. One was that leadership is not for everyone, and we cannot repeat this often enough. We glorify leadership because we think it is the highest standard for professional existence. That is absolutely not true. Our specialists add just as much value as leaders do, just in a different way. And the second thing you said that was really powerful was that as a leader, initially you walk into a room and you ask, how are they viewing me? Where you should be asking, what am I seeing?
Mhm.
Because it's only when the perspective shifts, it's like the other side of the coin, where you realize what your environment needs from you. But we can really truly do that once we have established our own leadership identity.
Yeah. Yeah, you
And
can't do that
that's
when you're still trying to chameleon all the other leaders you see and be whoever somebody needs of you in that moment.
and this is one of those misconceptions I see happen so much for our millennials and Generation Z. The former generation was very methodical about going through the stages. And our latest generations, they really want to skip a couple of phases and they come into an environment and they want to embody authority in their authority already without having created depth, without done integration. The structure is not perfectly formed yet. The integration is not embodied yet. And then they want to be seen as authority. To your point, it's very important to recognize that before you get to that point, you have to be more receptive to feedback and take guidance and do a lot of self reflection. Once the pivotal moment comes where we have accomplished all of that, step into inner authority if we don't have the right guidance to help us make that pivot. It becomes nearly impossible. I know you've seen this around you, how leadership can become more tyrannical and much more, let's say, ego driven, more identified, a lot more from a perspective of I'm the most important person in the room. So my question to you is, though, if you were to say there is one of these three phases that I need to put more focus on right now, which one of them would it be?
Interesting. That's hard to answer because I'm, in the weeds of first 30
Yes.
days at a new job, so it's really easy to kind of want to lean into that integration phase again almost.
Mhm.
I think every time you find yourself in a new environment, like I mentioned earlier, you're redrawing boundaries at the same time as wanting to prove yourself. You want to be a person who shows up, but you don't want to be a person who answers emails on a weekend because
Exactly.
then you will always be a person who answers email on a weekend. So it's integrating what I have learned about myself that works and doesn't work with a new environment that may work differently with those characteristics. So I don't know if that's a knee-jerk answer because I'm living that right now
No,
or not, but
absolutely not. I could not have answered that question better myself because that's absolutely true. We're never done with these developmental phases. We just go through them from a different perspective, from a higher perspective, from a different level of growth.
I remember you drawing that out for me actually when I had switched jobs and then was, very pregnant and navigating that in my life and talking about how, oh, we did all this integration work, but I feel like I'm doing it again. And you were like, yes, that's the point. You finally got it.
Yes. You were top of one stack and the bottom of the next one.
Yeah, you sort of like drew a line and then you were like, this is how you're thinking. And then you drew a bunch of squiggly lines and you were like, this is what you're actually doing.
Yes. If all else fails, I could always become an illustrator.
Exactly. You got that in your back pocket.
Exactly. It's been really wonderful to watch you grow. And I want to share with the listeners as well that you have had a major breakthrough in your self development, in your development altogether as a leader. And that was that instead of allowing the environment to decide for you, you have decided for yourself this time.
I had personally an incredibly strong mentor and leader who I
Mm,
just loved working with, would walk through fire for. Like he was absolutely
yes.
wonderful. I honestly attribute a ton of my career to him. Shout out to Steve Lockington. But it took me, like I said, COVID and just working really hard and being in sort of just this owe it to this place, this person for me to like actually, okay, this is my career. I'm going to pick my head up. So I did make that choice. And in fact, when I decided to look, I think I applied to 4 places. I had 4 offers. It was during that kind of job boom in tech and they were all like twice the salary I was making at that point. So it was my own choice, but it was 6 years maybe after I should have made that choice for what was in my career.
Better late than never, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have talked about it that way with you as if it was always and even the job where half of my team was like, oh,
Mm,
ultimately, I mean, I did the same thing again. So despite having learned that, if I had left 6 months earlier or something, I think it would have been better for the company. I think it would have been better for me, but I felt like I owed it to that team that I was there. So all the things that I thought I had already learned, I was living again, I was doing again, and I couldn't see it
exactly.
until it actually happened. That I was just like, oh, this is what I wanted, but I didn't want it to happen this way.
Exactly. And uh, that's the beauty and also the double-edged sword of the survivor strategies. Because if they were so easy to see, they would not be survivor strategies anymore. They would just become healthy patterns of relating and systematic approach to analysis. But they're not. And it takes a certain type of environment to trigger that growth moment where we have to examine our motivations. And sometimes it takes a week, other times it takes 6 months, and sometimes it takes 6 years to navigate through that. However, I have witnessed firsthand how you've done things differently this time round. Mhm. And I'm so proud of you for that. I think I'm allowed to say that. I'm very proud of you.
Well, you were a
And I
huge
would
part of me building that confidence. So thank you.
You're so kind. It's been a pleasure. But I want you to talk to the listeners as if you're speaking to them directly and
Mm.
give them one word of advice, one sentence of advice, one advice that would help them navigate the same challenge of feeling obligated to stay, feeling that what they have is a privilege, feeling tied to the environment, and having a hard time choosing their next best step from an internal authority.
One piece of advice. Well, I think that when you are in it, it is so hard to do anything other than rationalize staying in it. Sometimes it's benefits, sometimes it's salary, sometimes it's imposter syndrome. There's a million and six different reasons that you can make to stay. But I think usually you always can feel if it's time to go. And the only time I've gotten myself into trouble is when I didn't listen to that feeling. Sometimes it took longer than others when I
Yes.
was younger, but still, like, just absolutely knowing in my
Mhm.
gut that it was time to move on for everyone involved, and not doing it is the only time that I've regretted the way I handled a situation. Even staying there for 6 years, I still learned a lot. I still had a great, experience, but I wouldn't say I regret that. So if you are looking to avoid no, not avoid regret. If you're looking to build your career, listen to how you feel about what
Mhm.
your environment is doing for you over pragmatically what you think you need. And this is from a person who very much values security. So this is a hard one. But you can't always know, but you can always feel is sort of it. And
It's beautiful.
your security, if you're a bird, your security is in your wings, not the branch. So
I love that so much. Your security is in your wings, not the branch. And I think the listeners, we really love getting the affirmation from you that once the identity is fully examined, integrated, the internal architecture is built, the voice of authority is growing, and self esteem is supporting it, you are allowed to listen to the feeling instead of over intellectualizing your choices.
mhm. There you go. That's a perfect, succinct way to say what I just spent 300 words unnecessarily saying.
You said it beautifully, and the listeners had to hear it from your voice. That's so true, Emily. I wanted to emphasize that this growing intuition in you, the sense that you know what the right thing is to do, it comes from having gone through those stages of development, those phases, and really going through the mud, through the stickiness of it, because it has gravity to it, right? Every time you feel like, okay, I've got my feet on the edges now, you get sucked right back in if the work is not fully done. But once that work is done, then you are allowed to listen to that voice. And the funny thing is, wouldn't you agree with me when I say, once that work is done, it's not hard work to hear the voice?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not even hard work to respect the voice. Like with
No.
this most recent job transition, I think it wasn't just that I heard it and I decided to act on it. It was that when I put in my notice, I've had a really wonderful career of excellent leaders. Love my
Yes.
boss, would have wanted to stay with him in a different situation, but first of all, had a wonderful opportunity that had reached out to me that just
Mhm.
sounded like calling for the type of people first leadership that I want for. And secondly, I didn't have any trouble saying to him, it's not comp, it's not any of these things. Like, this environment just feels different than what I'm looking for. And like that I think also makes it easier for your
Yeah.
leaders to let they're not going to try and chase it. Like, they hear that differently. And it's once you are in touch with that feeling and you can hear it, it's easier to give it power. It's easier to give it respect. It's easier to, I think, the opportunities kind of come to you when you aren't looking for them, but you know that you're not in the right situation. It's almost loud after a while.
That's absolutely true because the chatter disappears.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
exaggerated, excessive, extreme mental chatter that literally zaps our energy. It's like trying to eat soup from a spoon that has a hole in it. You keep wanting to nurture yourself, but you can't because the mental chatter gives you nothing. It just puts you in overdrive and activating your nervous system.
Yeah. When you're coming from that place of fear, oh, I have to keep this job for these benefits, your nervous system's just kind of crackling all the time. So you
Exactly.
give it permission
Exactly.
to relax because you're like, yeah, if I don't have this job, I would find something else. And there are, systems and people to support me. And what do I actually want? What environment is good for me?
Mhm. And that's the perfect example of having inner authority. Because once we get ourselves to a point where we have gone through the layers of integration, internal architecture, embodiment, and building our inner authority, our presence is growing. All we have to do is just get into that state. There's no fight. And that's what most authors writing about flow are really talking about. Flow is not something you get into. Flow is something you allow by not fighting anything anymore, by not having this excessive mental chatter that tries to question every move you make, but really moving through it from inner alignment. Once you do that, then inner authority is not challenging. It's not ego, it's not ambition, it's not fake charisma. It's a state. You're in it, and because of it, you're magnetic. People are literally drawn to you. Jobs are drawn to you. Even if you're in a role and people are in a completely different department, they're going to want to come and talk to you because you exude that calm and grounded presence that says, I have embodied my own architecture and I know how to impact my environment without diminishing myself, without discounting my own value. And that's so profound.
I love that. I do. I have always said, even though it took 20 years of practicing yoga to really integrate it into my professional
Yes.
life, that every person in leadership should do yoga.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
necessarily the physical practice, but at least the mental practice.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about that, Emily. Yes, there is so much more to you than just being a leader in your niche. Tell us a little bit about some of the practices you have personally that help you stay grounded and aligned.
I have always found comfort in moving. When I was younger, that was all kinds of sports and running and everything. But I picked up yoga pretty young, and I just find that is always a grounding opportunity, even on calls, which can lead to some embarrassing moments when people first started doing virtual calls, and you were used to only phone calls and not having camera on. Not that I've ever been caught in headstand on a call, but we can leave that one out. But it's just a physical opportunity to reset, reconnect to your body, reconnect to the ground, also ride horses. I have a lot of things outside of work that kind of help me bring me back to myself. But yoga especially is a great one because you can have 5 minutes between meetings and just go sit on a floor in a different space and do breathing exercises or literally look at things upside down for a while.
Yes.
Or there's all sorts of mudras that kind of help with pressure points in your hands. There's just a lot of opportunity, especially once you dig deeper than the physical practice for, visualizations, meditations that can, even when you only have a few minutes, reset. So you're not going from all the context switching of virtual work where
Yeah,
you're in one conversation with a one-on-one with a team member who's having a really difficult time. And the next one is a missed deadline. And you
exactly.
need that reset.
You do. You do. And you live it by example. Emily teaches yoga
I do,
and
yes.
doesn't just practice it. She lives her philosophy in every way.
I do nothing halfway. I have no chill.
No, no, Emily does nothing halfway. A lot of high performers out there are going to be able to relate to you, Emily. They know how it's like.
Yes.
It's committing to it no matter what.
It gives you an opportunity that I'm excited to kind of grow into in my career too, teaching yoga. I think I told you this at one point, but you learn a lot of cues for differently abled people. And,
Absolutely.
it's as someone who's always been flexible, always been relatively, consistent in my practice. When I was pregnant, I switched to teaching chair yoga and I would do some of the things that I'd been cueing for 10 years and be like, oh, that's what that means. So it all feels different all of a sudden.
Oh gosh, it's so humbling to go through that experience and see it from the other perspective as well. It's a definition of yoga, right? Presence and truly being able to understand what it means to be inside the body from not just the vantage point of a fully healthy functioning body, but also the limited ones and just moving that
Yep.
energy around. It's so beautiful. I love that.
It was also true with, you extend that into your professional life. Like I said, the one time my half my team was like, "Oh, I'd been in the position of having to let people go before, both everything from mass layoffs to, individual decisions." And there's a lot you tell someone, but until you actually experience it, it feels different to hear it. So everybody I've unfortunately had to make that decision with since, like, coming at it with a very different empathy than I could have. And, there are some things you only get from experience.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And as the journey calls for, you're going to continuously go through the ups and downs of the valley. And with every movement through it, you'll take a higher perspective, maintaining that curiosity and humility that says there is more to learn. It just makes the journey so much more profound and enjoyable.
That's the exciting part of being human. There's literally always more to learn.
Absolutely. Before you go, Emily, I have one last question for you.
Mhm.
If the 50-year-old version of you were to speak to you right now, having gone through even more integration, even more internal architecture embodiment, and increased in our authority, what would this very wise version of you, because you're super young, you still have miles to go before you get to 50, what would this wise woman advise you?
I hope that she would advise me to keep listening to what feels right, especially from a career perspective. As you know, my most recent switch was out of SaaS. I've been in technology for a long time, and now I'm in an entire, not just a different SaaS industry. I'm not in SaaS anymore. And there's already moments of not in Kansas anymore. But I have gone through a lot to focus on how I prioritize, not what I prioritize. And I hope that she would tell me to keep going on that path, to keep honing my skills for identifying and having the courage to choose the things that are serving me and my family over the things that sound better on paper or seem like accomplishments or, whatever, however else you might make decisions in today's day and age. I'm hoping that's um, I'm not sure exactly how she would phrase it, but I think that that's the direction that I've felt empowered to choose. But only, in the last 6 months, I turned down what would have been a large comp and title increase to take this role that
Yes.
felt different in a completely kind of lateral-ish move. And I hope that she would tell me that I'm just beginning a new way of thinking about things and that it was the right path and that I've come a long way down that. And that would bleed into my personal life too. And I don't know. What do you think she would tell me? I'm curious.
Oh, I know exactly what she would tell you, but I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to get there. But I can tell you this much: she's one wise woman. That's profound, Emily. I love hearing that. And I'm going to keep asking that question from everyone who comes on this podcast. I think the listeners can really benefit from the words of wisdom that come from the future.
I'm excited to hear their story.
Me too. Me too. Absolutely. Now, before you go, do you have any last words of advice you would like to give to our listeners?
If you are aiming for leadership growth, whether that's as an IC or as a people manager or even just in your personal life, get an executive coach. And I will say out loud for the record that I swear you didn't tell me to say that, but I
did not.
truly, everybody I work with as growing leaders, this has been my number one kind of ability to unlock change in my own journey, and that I have now watched other people go through that are just kind of struggling to take those next steps all the way through to now they're off to the races and, doing their own thing. And there are people that used to report to me that I would feel proud to report to now that have unlocked a lot of that through coaching and through, an objective view. So seek that out, actually do that work.
Exactly. And let the record show I did not instruct Emily to say that.
You didn't know I would. You might
No.
delete it later. But no, that really would be it's just the objective unlock of somebody. It's different than your manager. It's different than your mom. It's different than
Absolutely.
even a therapist or anything like that. It's
Oh, yes.
truly, yeah.
Thank you for that, Emily. It's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. I'm so excited to share this podcast with the listeners, and I know it's going to benefit many. Thank you for your time.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and for all the work you've done over the last couple of years to help get me here.
It's been my pleasure. We're only getting started, Emily. We've still got a while to go. Our
Yeah,
journey is
no, I'm looking
long.
forward to that 50.
Yes. I'll speak to you soon, Emily.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm certain you are taking away some nuggets of wisdom from the interview with Emily as she unpacked how she has been navigating through her journey through the valley and continues to do so as she grows her leadership. Remember, the path to greater levels of development is not around the valley, it is through it. And for now, I'll leave you with this. Shift your psychology to shift your biology and shift your leadership. Until next time.